I think this will be the last one for a while. I don't know if I'll do book 12 or not. There's a 12 book series. I'm not sure if I'll do it or not. I've got a few other books in line that I'm going to do first. But this is book 10 in the series. And I'm going to do a lot of sharing. So be prepared for spoilers. Lots and lots of spoilers. Lots of spoilers, because I'm going to read a lot of this book to you. I like sharing the books. I like sharing the stories with you. And we're losing some of SKYE. Well, SKYE O'MALLEY died about 3 books ago, but her legacy is still ongoing. And Jasmine is the last core kind of group. So I need to get past that, and maybe I'll do the lesson. But I've got some other books prepared. But anyways, this is the D. Louise book series. It's nice to meet you. My name is Christina, K-R-S-T-I-N-A. This is where we read books and talk books. No special effects going on here. I have bad lighting, bad audio, I have bad everything. But this is, what you see is what you get. I can't do anything else about it. I don't have the money. Bills come before luxuries. You know that. So, and please hit the like and subscribe if you can. And also please check out my Star Trek Next Generation recaps on Friday. Also my weekly episode of If Then. If you like this episode, then maybe you'll like, if you like this author, then maybe you'll like that author. We started out with the Bridgertons. If you like them, you like Joanna Lindsay's Mallory's, Stephanie Lawrence Sisters. They need to make a movie of that. I've talked about that before. And Flashback Mondays. You have to check out Flashback Monday. I do over 30 books every week. So anyway, this is book 10, Beatrice Small, the SKYE O'MALLEY series. This is Intrigue. And none of Beatrice Small's first husbands ever live. They always die. So you're always prepared for him to die immediately. Or not immediately. Some of them die immediately, some of them take a while. So we are going to start off, it starts off with Jasmine, who you remember from the previous books. What did I do with them over there? Was married to the Earl of Dunkirk. And we start the book off on a sad note. James Leslie, 5th Earl and 1st Duke of Glenkirk, lay dying on the battlefield at Dunbar. Around him he could still see and hear clearly many of the brave, loyal men who would join him in death this day. The Scots were being brutally beaten by an army but half their size, yet with mindless arrogance they had moved the previous day from their position of strength on the hills surrounding Dunbar plainly to boldly make their encampment directly before the English. It was a fatal mistake, for the terrain was impossible to defend, as the Scot army of King Charles II quickly discovered. Of the 23,000 who had seen the day begin, only 9,000 remained to see it end among the mid-smoking ruins of Royal Scots' hopes. Among the survivors was Red Hugh Moore Leslie, the Duchess of Glenkirk's personal captain, who was seeing his master fall, had leapt over the dead and wounded to cradle James Leslie in his arms. "We'll get you out of here, my lord," Red Hugh said. James Leslie shook his head faintly, saying but one word before he died: "Jasmine." So then we move to Queen's Malvern. If you remember that Queen's Malvern was SKYE O'MALLEY's home for most of her life. And we are there with Leslie, Lady Autumn Leslie, and she's complaining to her brother, Charles Stuart, Duke of Lundy, about the fact that because the country is at war, there is no court, there's no parties, there's no way for her to obtain a husband in this particular atmosphere. The gossip is that there has been a battle in Scotland and Parliament's forces have won out over King Charles II's army. Rumor, however, aren't fact. Perhaps I should go to Worcester later this week and see what I can learn, the Duke said. Worcester? You're going to Worcester? Well, get me some yarn, some thread. Bess Stewart was a lovely woman with light brown hair filled with golden highlights and warm gray-blue eyes. Good Lord. She's gonna bing to death. The youngest daughter of the Earl of Welk, she and Charlie Stewart had fallen in love at first sight. She had just turned 16 and he was 26, considered a rake and a rogue by those at court who knew him. Still, his amber eyes had met Bess' light-bodied, sweet gaze, and his heart was immediately engaged. He began to play her most assiduous court. The Earl of Welk and his wife had been horrified that Charles Frederick Stewart, the late prince's bastard offspring, with the beautiful but notorious Jasmine Leslie herself, the dubious member of an infamous family, a young man openly accepted and beloved by the king and all his kin, despite his shameful birth, should seek to pay his address to their youngest daughter. They sent Bess home to Dorset, certain that would end the matter. They had undermisted her opponent. Bess had not gone from court a week when she was recalled by royal command to be one of the Queen's maids of honor. The Earl of Welk sought to protect his daughter from the young Duke of Lundy's insistent advances by seeking a suitable marital alliance with a thoroughly respectable family, preferably one with similar religion and political leanings. And it didn't work. Learning from Bess of her father's plans, Charlie had sought aid from his uncle, King Charles I. Understanding his nephew's plight, the king had called the Earl and Countess of Welk into his presence. My nephew, the Duke of Lundy, has told me that he wishes to wed your daughter Elizabeth, the king began. He has asked me to act for him in this matter. While your antecedents, my lord, hardly make your daughter a suitable match for Charlie, we are of a mind to allow it, for we love the lad right well, and he has never before asked a favor of us. Unlike so many others people who are court, bring your daughter to us tomorrow at this time. If she agrees to the match, we will permit it. And her parents were massively pissed that they were going to allow their daughter to marry this guy, but he had wealth and land. I don't know what was wrong with it. So Charlie goes off to Charlie. He goes off to Worcester for the day to try and learn what's going on and stuff. And while he's gone, hell comes to Queen's Malvern. The Roundheads were a political group during this particular time period. And they come in to Queen's Malvern. They barge their way in. A serving wench ran up the stairs from the kitchen to warn the rest of the house. The Duchess hurried from her bedchamber to the nurseries. The nursemaids already had Sabrina and little Willie up and were dressing them as quickly as they could. Take the children into the gardens and hide, Bess said. No, Mamma, Sabrina said. I want to be with you. You will go to the gardens with Mavis and Clara, the Duchess said firmly, and hurried from the nurseries. What is happening? Autumn came from her room with Lily, her wake. Roundheads in Worcester, yes. They come in, and the major domo wasn't quick enough in opening the door, and they kill him. And then Bess tries to defend the situation, and they kill her too. So Charlie's wife is now dead. And the guy's boss comes in and says, I'm sorry, if I had been here, this would not have happened. And he says, who are you? Because they were trying to steal Bess's rings off her dead body. Can you believe looting this woman in the middle of her family members surrounding her, watching her lay on the floor dead? And the guy comes in and he says, who are you? And she says, Lady Autumn Leslie, daughter of the Duke of Glenkirk, sister to the Duke of Lundy, whose house this is, Autumn replied. It is the policy of the so-called Commonwealth to invade the houses of its citizens to loot and kill. And who the hell are you that you have such little control over your men? Sir Simon Bates, madam, at your service, he responded. What are you going to do about this animal? Autumn demanded. He will be punished, I assure you, madam, Sir Simon said. An eye for an eye, Autumn said. I want it done now. Give me your pistol and I will do it myself. Would you really? Sir Simon was suddenly amused. The girl was distraught, of course. She would not really kill Watkins in cold blood, but to appease her, he handed her his pistol and she shot him through the eyes. And he is dead. And they leave, and first of all, she goes, you thought I wouldn't do it, didn't you? Adam said quietly. Who taught you to shoot? Simon said. My father, whom your people killed at Dunbar. Are you going to arrest me? I don't care if you do. I should, Simon said, but I will not, Madonna, as you have succinctly put it, an eye for an eye. Besides, Watkins was of little import, but he was but cannon fodder and would have been killed sooner or later. And then, too, there was the matter of the pistol which I gave you. While I did indeed not believe you would actually shoot the scum, I accept responsibilities for Watson's execution. And she's like, you get him out, you get your people out, and they go. And then, like an hour later, Charlie gets home to discover his wife and Major Domo have been killed. So that is just horrible. So Jasmine arrives from Scotland and come into the great hall, Henry said, and Charlie will tell us everything, Mama. He quickly instructed his servants to see to the children, to the nurses with his own brood, and bring wine and biscuits for the family. His wife, he explained, was not home, out tending to some sick tenants, but even as they settled themselves in the great hall of Calby, Rosamond Wyndham Lindley hurried in with a smile, greeting her guests and fussing at her servants to bring refreshments in a more timely fashion. They do take advantage of Henry, she said with a twinkle. Rosamond was Henry's second wife and the mother of his children. The Marquis's first wife, his beautiful cousin Cicely Burke, had died 6 months after their wedding, when she fell from a horse as she took a particularly high jump, breaking her neck. Cicely had died instantly, and Henry had gone into shock, refusing to leave Calby, seeing only his brother Charlie and his oldest sister India as he mourned his young wife. 2 years after Cicely's death, the Marquis of Wellesley was invited to the wedding of the Earl of Langford's heir Charlie, who had also been prevailed upon his elder sibling to go. You can't mourn forever, he said. Mamma certainly never did. So Henry Lindy had gone to the wedding of River's Edge, and to his astonishment met the girl who was to be the love of his life, Rosamond Wyndham. Was at almost 16, not ready to consider marriage, but the Marquis of Wellesley knew what he wanted. God rest his sweet Cicely, but he was finally ready to get on with his life. He courted Rosamond with a mixture of charm, humor, and determination. Unable to resist him, Rosamond wed Henry Lindy shortly after her 17th birthday. Where is Bess? She is dead, Charlie told his mother, and then proceeded to relate the entire tale. When he had finished, Jasmine Leslie looked at her youngest amazed. You shot a Roundhead trooper, she said. Autumn nodded. God's blood, the Dowager Duchess exclaimed. I remember a time when my grandmother did a similar deed to save my life and that of my children. 'Twas a brave act as yours was. I am proud of you. Surely, Mamma, you don't condone murder, the Marquis of Wellesley said, shocked at his sister had done. The man was scum and had murdered both Beth and a trusted servant, the Dowager Duchess said. Autumn was protecting herself, for who knows what this Simon Bates would have done otherwise. The fact that he accepted responsibility for the trooper's death shows my daughter proved to this villain that she is a strong gal and not to be taken advantage of by any. And then they go through. Simon Bates returns to Queen's Malvern a couple of days later to make apologies, and then they head to France. They're going to go stay at Bellefleur's, and if you remember, that was Skye's and Adam's place while they were in France. It belonged to Adam's family. And this is where she meets. Let me see if I can get to the page. The chapters are long ones, and they are good chapters. So they get to Bellefleur's, was built in the year 1415. Bellefleur's was now 235 years old, but its original construction had been sound and considered quite modern for its day. constructed of flattened rough-hewn blocks of reddish-gray crisp. Belfloras had 4 polygonal towers with dark slate roofs that shaped like witches' hats, set at each corner of the building. So they get to the Belle's floor, and she meets the Marquise d'Arville, and we get Jasmine gives a little bit of her history. They're gonna have the 2 cousins come by and be her companions. Overwhelming, Jasmine supplied with a smile. I, both Gabby and Tonette are all engulfing in their desire to see that everything is done properly. I remember my grandmother saying that they were very much like their mother, but Autumn, we are fortunate to have their good advice. I want you happy, my child, and your father would too. Suddenly, Autumn's eyes filled with tears. I miss him, Mama, she said brokenly. Why did he insist on going to war for the Stuarts? Jasmine closed her eyes for a long moment so she might arrange her own grief. Then, opening them, she said, You know why, Autumn. James Leslie was the most honorable man I ever knew. He knew it was a fatal mistake for the Leslies of Glenkirk to defend and follow after the Stuarts, but they were his overlords and mated to him by blood. In his mind, even realizing it was likely to be a disaster, he felt compelled to obey their call, particularly as his own distant Leslie kin were involved up to their hips in the muddle, and he was 72 years old. He went to war at 72 years old. Your father might have pleaded his age, but he would not, and it was there, and he and I disagreed. I do not believe his honor would have been compromised by refusing to go. He did. It was easier for him to live with my disapproval than his own self-scorn. So he is dead and in his tomb at Glenkirk, and you and I are here in France attempting to make a new life for ourselves. And then she meets she gets a couple of suitors. What was I going to read here? Damn the Stuarts, damn you, Jamie Leslie, for going off and leaving me alone. Your loyalty to me should have been greater than your loyalty to the Stuarts. What they did ever do for you? Nothing. And then she began to cry tears. And you remember that Jasmine's servants, Aldi and Tamale, have been with her for a very, very, very long time, since her birth. And they were 80. And Jasmine is past 60. So I missed that page where I did she meets the Marquise. And she's gonna go to court and she needs 100 petticoats. I don't know why I wanted this page read. But when I met you, let's see. He is handsome, Jasmine said to her daughter later that night as they sat before a fire in the apartment. Gabby absolutely adores him. She says his chateau is simply gorgeous. He says he will ask us to visit in the spring, Autumn told her mother. He is nice. I suspect he knows he is. My cousin asked him to come early so he might gain an advantage with you. I think she might have miscalculated. I don't know what's the matter with me, Mama, Autumn said with a deep sigh. When you met Papa, were you so disinterested? When did you know he was the one for you? When I met your father, my stepsister Sybil had decided she was going to be the next Countess of Glenkirk, for your father was not a duke then. But Jamie didn't want Sibby, and I was to marry Rowan Lindy. After I was widowed and after Charlie was born, your father finally got around to trying to court me. He had always held a certain fascination for me. There was a spark was there, I just did not allow it to burst into flame. By the time I was your age, Autumn, I had 2 husbands and 2 children. I know it seems the entire emphasis of coming to France is finding on you a husband, maybe. But if no man takes your fancy, you must not marry for the sake of marrying. You must be happy, Autumn, and if being unwed makes you happy, then so be it. But she takes her time with Sebastian. Um, Jesus, I thought I wrote pages down with Sebastian. Um, I do not wish to marry some passionate creature. Marry, Autumn. Autumn was astounded by his words. What do you mean, marry? You have come to France to find a husband, or at least that is the gossip, he told her. And he laughed when she blushed. I am, to my relief of my relations, now in the market for a wife. I think you will do nicely, Lady Autumn, Rose Leslie. The voice, it was his voice. You, it was you. The gentleman in the forest who said he was a thief. The music stopped and her partner bowed elegantly. Jean Sebastian de Leon, Marquise d'Arville, at your service, madame. He caught her hand and kissed it, but he did not let it go. Instead, he led her across the great hall into a small alcove. I would not marry you if you were the last man on earth, Autumn said angrily. I would rather die a virgin. There is no chance of your dying a virgin, Cherie, but you surely cannot prefer those two bumbling suitors who dog your every move. Antony is a duke, and you are only a marquise, Autumn said. As for Guy de Rais, he amuses me. I don't even know you. You will, he told her. Now, as for Saint Mail, he will be a duke, but my blood is far bluer than his. He backed her against the stone wall of the alcove. Have you ever been kissed? He asked her. One of his arms stretched out to confine her, while the fingers of his other hand brushed against her full mouth. Your lips are like petal roses, and he kisses her, and she falls in love. And then she spends a couple chapters getting to know him, and goes riding with Sebastian, and she meets the future king, King Louis of France, and he tries to just seduce her. He's only 13 years old, and he's trying to seduce. Yes, ma'am. Come here. Come here. Where are you? What are you doing? So he tries to seduce a 13-year-old kid, trying to seduce a 19-year-old girl. But the king doesn't forget her. He remembers her for future times. Then Sebastian has a couple of secret missions to do for the king. He has to carry secret messages, so he goes off for a couple of chapters. Then we learn of a plot. They're talking about the fact that the queen is the king. He has not been coronated yet. He will be coronated when he's like 12 and a half, 12 years and 10 months. And he will be coronated when he's 13, like in 2 weeks. And they don't want, the queen has been his advisor, and they don't want the queen to be his advisor anymore. They want the guys that surround him, they want to be the one to advise the king. So they need to remove the queen. And they're not going to kill her, they're just going to kidnap her. And they're going to lie to the king and say she's off with her lover. But she's not. Her lover is off in someplace else, being sequestered someplace else for his own security. So they make plans to kidnap the queen, so that they can have the king to themselves. And then they go to the coronation. But Sebastian de Leon, to his great annoyance, was not married. The Duchess of Glenkirk had been called to Paris with her daughter by their exiled English queen, Henrietta Maria, to attend the young French king's formal investiture. Following his 13th birthday on September 5th, the proclamation of the king's majority would take place on the 7th of September, attended by as many of the nobles in France who could get there. It would be celebrated with great pomp and show, for Anne of Austria was looking forward to this day since her son inherited his father's throne 8 years earlier. She had beaten those who attempted to take her son from her and rule in his name. Now she was triumphed. Only the absence of Jules Marzine, her faithful partner in this miracle, saddened her. But the Marquis d'Avo, like many of his neighbors, could not leave his vineyards with the harvest season upon them. In Paris Autumn, her mother and two aunts were fortunate that the Desfile family had a small hotel on the Rive Gauche located at 4 Rue Celestine. Because they had no time to send word ahead, the old concierge, Madame Alma, was distraught as the large traveling carriage pulled into the building's courtyard. She shuffled toward distress upon her face. "Madame St. Omer, Madame Beflot, why did you not send word you were coming?" Well, it was a last minute thing. So they have to clear out the house and stuff like that. So they do that, and so the Queen has two sons, James Duke of York and Henry Duke of Gloucester, and she makes the Duke James the Duke of York gets friendly with Autumn. Why do you smile as if you have a secret, cousin? James Stewart asked her as they finished the dance and led her from the floor. Not that it's a most delicious smile, mind you. You are not my cousin, she replied. Your father is my first cousin by virtue of his paternity. Therefore I consider you my cousin as well, Lady Autumn. The prince returned with a grin. Are you flirting with me, my lord? He was. Would you like me to cease, my lady? He grinned engaging. And Autumn suddenly realized they were in a remote alcove of the hall. His amber eyes were glittering spectacular at her. Yes, and said, I would like you to stop, Jamie Stewart. I am betrothed to be married shortly. You remember that the Leslies of Glenkirk are honorable clan. You are so beautiful, so I have been told on many occasions. Why do you marry this Frenchman? He asked her as he backed her into the alcove. Because I love him, and there was no one in Scotland, where I have spent most of my life, whom I loved. Have you ever been in love, my lord? It's an emotion that has no rhyme or reason. My eldest sister fell in love with a man who became another man. My second sister chose the wrong man and was forced for love of him to go to the New World, where they built a wonderful life together. I came to France to escape the misery of Cromwell has done to our homeland and found Sebastian. Is not love strange? And then Sebastian saves her from that one. Then she marries Sebastian. They have news. What news from England, Mama? Autumn asked. It's not good, Jasmine said. I was going to tell you after the wedding, but you may as well know now. King Charles marched into England with a Scots army. Do I need to tell you how the English felt about that? Instead of getting the full support he needed from his countrymen, they recoiled in horror at the skirl of the pipes. All the English could see was an invading Scots army. That their own king was at its head meant little. The English have never really taken to the Stuarts. As much as they dislike Master Cromwell, they hate the Scots for more. It seems to be ingrained in their souls. This tribal hate for the Scots. What a pity the king did not consider the centuries of warfare before he came over the border in Kilt and Tam. What happened? King Charles was defeated in early September at Worcester. Charlie, I do not know. Henry sent me the news. He says there was no word that Charlie had been killed, but he had no idea where he may be or even if he's alive. Jasmine responded, her voice suddenly hard. He's alive, Mama, Autumn said firmly. What makes you so certain? Henry writes that Worcester was terrible and there were many slain. Charlie is the not-so-royal Stuart, Mama. He isn't a Leslie. He's a Muggle grandson. He has luck, unlike poor Papa. You may be well right, her mother said, and then she laughed. You're probably right, Autumn. My son Charlie could charm even death out of taking him too soon. We will wait, and we will hear what has happened. And then Then later that day, um, of all my children, Autumn, you have the most expressive face. You wear your heart on your sleeve, my petite, Jasmine answered. It isn't forever, you know. One day King Charles will sit upon his throne again, and you will see the others, except for Fortune, whom you do not remember. She always said when she crossed the sea to Mary's land, she would not come back again. She is the one I regret most. As intolerance has cost you Papa and your home, Autumn said. It cost you a daughter too, but I am here for you, Mamma. I shall never leave you. Where I go, you must be. This is my promise to you on my wedding day. Jasmine hugged her youngest child, then taking her face in both her hands, kissed her cheeks. And my promise to you is that only death shall separate us. Madame, the mademoiselle's skirts, you will wrinkle them, Monsieur Renaud fumed. The woman laughed as the Duchess stepped back, and even the tailor smiled. Then Aldy's head popped around the door. The guests and the bridegroom await, he said. Will you and your assistants join us in the chapel, Monsieur Renaud? The Duchess asked the tailor, who nodded delighted. How envious his compatriots in Tours would be when he told them that not only had he finished Madame Latourte de Ravel's wedding gown, but he had invited to remain and see her take her vows. They all descended to the main floor of the chateau where the little chapel was located. Autumn was left outside its door while her mother and the others entered. She could see Sebastian, so very elegant, velvet suit and white lace, awaiting her at the altar. He was so handsome. Only if Papa were here today to give her into his keeping would be perfect. Then jumped startled at a familiar voice by her ear. Will you take my arm, little sister? Charles Frederick Stuart, the Duke of Lundy, said softly. Autumn turned and looked up at her favorite brother. Charlie, she cried, then promptly burst into tears. I just arrived at dawn this morning. Aldy told me it was your wedding day. I decided to surprise you and Mama. For God's sakes, Autumn, stop weeping, or I shall regret I came. Oh, Charlie, Autumn sobbed against his velvet doublet. I've never been happier in my whole life to see anyone. We heard about Worcester. Mommy was so worried. I told her you would escaped. I knew you wouldn't be dead. I knew it. He took his linen handkerchief from his doublet and gently wiped the tears from her face. You knew more than I did, Minx. I had one hell of a time escaping England, and there was no word on the king, although if he had been captured, Cromwell would be boasting on him. Still no one knows where he is. Charlie! Their mother's voice suddenly cut into their tender reunion. Bring your sister forward immediately before the Marquise cries off and she gets married. They have their wedding night. Then we get some more news. Let's see. I skipped it. I like reading these books. Do you like reading these books? I like reading these books. In the months that followed, it was obvious that the Marquise and Marquise de Ravel were much in love. Charlie Stuart remarked upon it to his mother, pleased that his sister had found happiness. The English king had finally escaped Cromwell's men to arrive in France. His adventures hiding in an oak tree beneath the noses of the Roundheads and riding Pillin disguised as a servant were wisely recounted. The main thing was that he was safe, to the relief of the many English nobles who joined his mother in exile. All of this information came via a letter to the not-so-royal Stuart from his friend Lord Carstairs. Charlie knew he would have to join his royal cousin sooner or later and opened his purse to support the king. The royal Stuart was quite impoverished upon his royal Rouen, where he had come ashore. At first he had been taken for a tramp, but even his old tutor, Dr. Earl, failed to recognize him. So gaunt and thin, the king grown in 6 weeks since Worcester. While he had been on the run from Cromwell and his men, the king was depressed. But despite all that had happened, his spirit had not been broken. He tried hard, Lord Carstairs wrote, to be cheerful, but the situation was so grim that it kept him returning to haunt him. So, he's going to be king again. He gets together with his mom again. And we get some more news. Oh, Jasmine is talking about uh, her former husbands. I shall not go until after Twelfth Night, he promised. I have sent the king a purse to tide him over and promised to join him in January, Charlie told his mother. Until then, I shall remain with you, Mama. He kissed her cheek. I think this is the first time in all my life I've ever had you to myself. That, she told him with a smile, is something Henry Stewart would have said. She patted his arm fondly. You loved him. I loved them all, Jasmine replied with a laugh. Then she grew somber. But they were all taken from me except for my Jamie. We lived a long and good life together. I hope I will some day forgive him for leaving me when I begged him not to do so. Autumn needed him. You did well by my little sister, Charlie reminded her. She is madly in love with her husband, and even more so since she discovered the joys of the marriage bed. Don't be so indelicate, his mother said. And since when, Mama, did you find passion indelicate? Um, so, uh, uh, when Autumn returned home late in the afternoon, several days later, she discovered her husband, Monsieur d'Albert, and another Monsieur Robert Clay, a long-lost cousin who had been traveling for so long in the East, Sebastian had believed him dead. You are welcome to Sherma, Monsieur Clary, Autumn said. Merci, Madame Laquise. Who is he really? Autumn asked her husband as they lay abed. Who is he? I am not a fool, Sebastian. Monsieur Clary is indeed his name, is no more than your cousin that I am. His conversation at table tonight was too insightful of current affairs for a man gone from France for 20 years. Who is he? And he can't tell her. Uh, oh, he turns out to be the Queen's liaison. So, anyways, let's get on with the story. They learn the Queen's story. They learn about the March on Belt. Then they form a plan. They have successfully taken the Queen from her son, and they've hidden her off in a corner estate, and they've told the son that she's hanging out with her lover, Marcin, but she's not. She's being held in this house. She has a servant, and they take care of her, but she's not allowed to leave the house. So Autumn and her lady friends in the neighborhood, they get together, they gather up a whole bunch of gifts, and they go to the house and say, hey, we know the Queen is here. We've come to pay our respects and give her presents and stuff. And then one of the ladies brings an extra clothing, and the Queen changes into the clothing, and she leaves with all the gaggle of females, and they hide her in the carriage, and she escapes, and they eventually return her to her son. But then the king, get on here a little bit. The king, Sebastian, has a heart attack and dies. He's really young, but he's out working the fields, and he has a massive heart attack and dies instantly. And so she mourns him for about a year or so. And then the king, who is now pushing 19, is looking for a lover, and he has to Autumn come to see him and be his mistress while he's looking for a wife. And she has the king's child, and she returns to Queen's Malvern, and that when they get to the house, it's interesting in that the servants pulled a fast one on the people that tried to take possession of the house. When they get to the house, the outside looks disgusting, but when they open the doors, they see the internal part of the house is spotless. Why would it not be, sir? A voice behind them said. As they turned, the man fell to his knees before Charlie and caught up his hand to kiss. Welcome home, my Lord Duke, Becket said. Charles Frederick Stuart, Duke of Lundy, bent down and raised up the man before him. Their eyes met. Charlie said 2 words. Thank you." Then he gave Beckett his hand and shake and clapped him on the back. "How did you manage to keep the house in incredibly good condition?" Beckett said. Um, the the um, the first thing the lieutenants did was remove the portraits of Lord and Lady Marasco from the family hall. And Lady Dunstan said to me that she had heard he was a pirate, but no better than a common, well, you know. And what they would do was they would make noises at night. They would set things on fire out of nowhere. They had paintings dropped from the wall. They pretended the house was massively haunted, and the people finally decided to leave. So they leave. So then uh, Charlie returns from court, and he's decided to take his sister with him to court. Now the family has always maintained two houses that were next door to each other, Greenwood and Linwood, and they get to the house, and they determine that Greenwood was confiscated by Cromwell, and Autumn is going to do everything in her power to get it back because it was Skye's, and Skye bought it with her own money. It never belonged to the crown or anybody else. It was always Skye's, and Autumn decides she wants it back. So she decides that she's going to get in with the king, and then there's a big, huge reveal at the end. She gets in with the king. She's going to have another child with the king. The kid is born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, so that is like horrible. And the king sets her up for marriage. She goes, "Well, if you want the house back, if you want Greenwood back, you're going to have to marry the current owner because I gave it to the current owner." And she doesn't like the current owner, but before they mend fences, the current owner's got to come clean. And the current owner was the guy pretending to be Simon Bates in the beginning, and he was the guy that gave Autumn the gun to shoot Watkins in the beginning of the book. So she has to get past all of that. But I will just leave that part of the book to you. But she has the horrible situation with the kid. We're just going to skip that. And we will go past all that. You can read all that for yourself. They get through all that. But the book ends in Queen's Malvern in 1663, almost 100 years after SKYE O'MALLEY was born. The front lawns at Queen's Malvern were covered with gaily colored tented pavilions. The black lawns and gardens were filled with people. SKYE O'MALLEY had borne 8 children, of whom 7 had lived to sire a generation of 49 grandchildren, who in their turn sired 158 grandchildren, 302 great-great-grandchildren, and 27 great-great-grandchildren. As the summer of 1663, the children of SKYE O'MALLEY were now all deceased, the last and youngest of them, Velvet de Marsco Gordon, having died the previous winter at the age of 84. 29 of Skye's grandchildren lived in on their 60s and 70s. Jasmine, Dowager Duchess of Glenkirk, stood proudly surveying the great crowd of SKYE's descendants. There were O'Flahertys who had travelled from Ireland, and O'Flahertys who had come up from Devon. The Earl of Astor and his family of Edwardses had come, as had the Southworth of Lymouth, young Earl John and his granddaughter Sabrina, the proud parents of a little son and baby daughter. The Blakeleys of Blackthorn, the family of SKYE's second daughter Deidre, lived nearby and were well represented, as were the Burkes of Clearford's Priory and the Gordons of Brockburn. These were the Leslies, Lindys, Stewarts, Ashburns, and Lees from Scotland, Ireland, and England. Only her daughter Fortune and her family were missing, Fortune having crossed the Atlantic Ocean to reach the New World, had vowed never to return again. Jasmine smiled as she viewed her many relations. The size of the growing family and the civil strife that had plagued England in the past years had only served to separate them. Now she had brought them back in an effort that had taken her almost 2 years. Cousins who had never met greeted each other with delight. Faces from different ends of the family spectrum were discovered to look alike. Cherry blue eyes were noted among many of the younger generations. There would be some matches come out of the gathering, Jasmine suspected. You have done it, Mamma, her daughter Autumn said, coming to her mother's side. I have indeed, haven't I? Jasmine agreed, putting an arm about her youngest. The Lawns would be ruined, but they can be replaced. Seeing all of Mam's progeny is well worth the damage. Gabriel says he is glad the gathering here is Queen's Malvern and not at Guardwood Hall. Gabriel has put on a bit of weight, hasn't he? Jasmine said. Marriage agrees with him, and marriage to him agrees with me, Mamma, Autumn said. How I love him. I never really believed I would ever love again. Those twins of yours certainly come from love, Jasmine said. I've never seen such contented little hellions as Jamie and Simon. God help you when they walk and talk. Can you tell them apart yet? Not yet, Mamma. They're so close that even begin to cry together. They are identical in every way, but hopefully when they are older something will distinguish one from the other. Just like their grandfather Leslie, they must have their own way. Just like their father. Thank you, Mamma. Thank you for knowing what was right for me and making me see it through my anger and heartbreak. Gabriel Bainbridge joined them, standing looking out over the crowd of his wife's family. Do you ever think our descendants will rival the stars in the sky as those do of your great-grandmother? Autumn looked up at her husband, her jeweled eyes twinkling with laughter. If you wish it, my lord, then we will have to produce more barns than we now possess. Then, madame, he replied with his own blue eyes with love, we'd best adjourn to the delightful rosy bedtime of us and get working. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed the book. I hope I didn't bore you too much with all my readings and sharings of the book. But this is probably going to be the last one for a little while. I might do... where is 11? What is 11? Oh, it's a guidebook. Just Beyond Tomorrow and Vixens. I don't think I'll do these for a while. It's going to be a while. I'm over it right now. The end of SKYE's legacy ended actually in book 7. So please go check out those videos. SKYE O'MALLEY has 2 videos. Then we did All Sweet Tomorrows. Then we did This Heart of Mine. Then we did A Love for All Time. Love Lost Found. I think this is one of my favorites after SKYE O'MALLEY. Wild Jasmine. Darling Jasmine. This is where SKYE dies. This is where she's born. This is where she dies. 7 books encompass her life. And then we did Lady India and Fortune Lundy. And we have just finished Autumn. And another beginning book, which I did last year, the Caden, is the beginning of the Leslie side of the family. So please hit the like and subscribe, and thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed these books as much as I did. Thank you.